Starring Senator Mona Silva Tyron as the news anchor.
I'm Mona Silva Tyron, and I'll have your local news every morning. Life moves pretty fast, so stay with us to stay informed right here on The Point.
Also starring Jerry Roberts as the Better Business Training Guru.
Get out there and do something good today, like listen to us Monday through Friday, 6 to 10 a.m., where we go extra for you.
Produced by the real Joe Cruz. And your warm and intelligent host, Ray Gibson.
It's the Gibson Stream of Consciousness. All the players and all the games with cameos and calls from the most interesting people like you. We'll see and hear you right here on your talk radio superstation. This is The Point.
The Ray Gibson Show was filmed before a live Facebook audience. Buying a house, apartment, or condo, selling your home or property, or maybe you're renting a house, apartment, or condo on Guam. Whatever your real estate needs are, you can count on the professionals at Horizon Properties to take care of you. Call Horizon Properties at 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonproperties.com or follow them on Facebook at Horizon Properties Guam. Maria Miller and the professionals at Horizon Properties. All you need to know in real estate. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and Mezcla Dos are open for takeout and delivery services. More details, call the Hagåtña location at 479-2652 or Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon at 646-6295. Get your Mezcla fix at the comfort of your home.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. I read it every day. It was the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution on Saturday and again on Sunday, even though I didn't have the chance to read it. But it's something I believe in every day of the week, tall tales or no tall tales. And, of course, you regular listeners know how Jose and I abhor Saturdays and Sundays because we're deprived of our favorite pastime, speaking to you out there in our international radio listening audience on Tall Tales. But we're back. We got a whole week of Tall Tales ahead of us. Monday is my favorite day of the week. So here we are, 8 minutes into the show on Monday. It doesn't get any better than that. Let's start out the celebration of Tall Tales with Zemi Iklatny. So we start out here with the Daily News, which once again runs some tripe from some other organization like USA Today or Gannett News Service, etc. It's almost always the same. It's always from something around the D.C. area and almost always bashes Trump, pretty hard on Republicans, sings the praises of the left. Today is no different. Today's title is Repudiate Extremism. Now, I'll give you $1 if you can guess what the definition of extremism is. And here's how the first sentence goes. Concern growing over heavily armed white supremacist groups. The white supremacist now is the new buzzword. That if you can't write a sentence around the phrase white supremacist, keep your pen in your pocket because you really don't have anything to say. So what does that mean? White supremacist. I think probably I have to plead guilty. In fact, I will, just for the sake of discussion. I am a white supremacist. I am what you would refer to as I suppose nowadays a white man. I mean, a white person. Once upon a time, I would have said that I was a white man, but then I'd have two groups after me, people of color and people who are non-binary. So yeah, so I'm white. Am I a supremacist? Well, let me coach this in neutral terms, and then come back to it. Here on the island, we have something that we refer to as the Chamorro culture. In fact, it's almost impossible to discuss any issue without talking in terms of the Chamorro culture. Last week, I covered a couple of news stories where the CLTC wants to give another lease to a group that broke their first lease so they can engage in cultural leases. And you don't have to listen very long, and you hear people talking about the Chamorro culture and how admirable it is, and the concept of anaphamalic, and on and on and on. So I think it would be fair to say that those who are of the Chamorro stripe, as a general rule, are proud of Chamorros. Is this good or bad? I can't see anything wrong with it. I think it would be a disaster if a person were identified in a particular racial group and said, well, you know, I'm a so-and-so, therefore I can't be proud of myself because I'm a so-and-so. In fact, that was the building blocks upon which the Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education was built. That the Supreme Court said that the mere fact that the races were segregated meant that one wasn't as good as the other. And they even cited Gunnar Myrdal in a footnote as to how devastating this was on the people. So yeah, I'm a white supremacist. I'd have to say that people that moved here from Europe that were my forebears, those Europeans did some pretty good things. In fact, a lot of really good things that we're enjoying even today. So yeah, I can't say that I would want to be anything other than what I am. Now, in some quarters, that would make me a white supremacist because I'm not embracing critical race theory. I'm not saying that because I am white, I have to take the blame for slavery, Jim Crow, racial segregation, racial prejudice, etc., all the things the Democrats did when they were in power. If I don't come up and say, yeah, I feel so bad about that, I feel so guilty, I need to do something to repent for the things that happened, that white people did before I was born. If I don't do that, only one conclusion is left. I am a white supremacist. Yeah, well, what am I going to do? So the article starts out, concern growing over heavily armed white supremacist groups. We can't risk a repeat of hate-inspired massacres. Now, they're talking about the school shootings. The end of the calendar year is routinely the time when journalists reflect on political and social trends. So what did 2020 signal in terms of our nation's scourge of white shootings, which some observers had described as an epidemic, etc.? And they go on and they talk about this shooting and that shooting. They don't talk about all the shootings that were just done by nuts that didn't have any particular political philosophy or anything else. They were just really screwy people. But that would be a departure from the narrative. And the narrative is that when things like that happen, you got to hang it on conservatives, preferably conservatives generally, preferably white male conservatives, if you can figure out how to do that. If you can't, well, then wait until tomorrow and we'll figure something else out when it comes along. So classic daily news running a left-wing boilerplate tripe and calling it an editorial. We turn next to the Guam Daily Post, and the Post hits on an executive order. Executive order concerning failure to address child abuse and neglect raises more questions. On Friday afternoon, Governor Leon Guerrero, through Communications Director Crystal Paco San Augustine, formerly known as Crystal Paco, announced the governor has signed an executive order placing Child Protective Services under the administrative oversight of Department of Youth Affairs. Now, if I were using the same tools that the lefties used, I'd say, yeah, that governor is going to take these poor kids at Child Protective Services and lock them up at DYA. Well, DYA and Child Protective Services executing an order placing Child Protective Services under the administrative oversight of DYA. What else could it mean? Yeah, I'm not a Lulian Guerrero fan, but Lulian Guerrero is not going to do that. I'm not going to say that.
You're not going to say kids in cages?
No, that's once again, that's the lefties. When Obama built the cages, put the kids in cages, had sufficient B-roll of the kids in cages shot so that it could be used against Trump. That was classic leftism.
You're not going to use language like rip the kids away from their parents?
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not a lefty.
Just be clear.
Essentially, the Department of Public Health and Social Services will be freed up from having administrative responsibility over CPS while public health is battling the pandemic and running Wuhan virus vaccinations and testing, and not doing a very good job at it, by the way. Public health resources are stretched thin in the Wuhan virus pandemic. The need to give it a break from its administrative authority over one of its multiple divisions makes sense. But the more worrisome reason cited in the executive order is that there have been potential shortfalls of supervision and administration of CPS, such that the result has been a failure to identify and therefore address serious and significant instances of child abuse, maltreatment, and neglect. This conclusion was reached after a December 2020 review of data regarding outstanding CPS referrals. CPS is required to commence investigations of reported allegations of child abuse or neglect within 72 hours of receiving reports. But in December 2020 review found that some children who have been referred to CPS have fallen through the cracks. The executive order gives DYA authority over CPS case management and staffing, including hiring of social workers. Now, whenever I say the H word, I immediately become suspicious. Yeah, okay, I get it. Now, DYA, CPA, who needs a job? Yeah, somebody what, pled to official misconduct and can't get a job outside, so the only refuge for them is the government of Guam, and Rory said he took too much heat last time, so he ain't going to do it again. The executive order sounds well-intentioned on the surface. However, we don't have enough detailed information to see the full picture. Well, just a suggestion here, and the Post ran a story on this also. Not much in the story that you don't, in fact, there's more in the editorial than there is in the story, but you could start out with this. Tell us who's in charge of CPS. What is the name of the person in charge of CPS? Tell us what happened when you went to interview that person, or give us a report on the interview. These are some of the things that we kind of look for in a newspaper. Okay, so the editorial says, we don't have enough detailed information to see the full picture. Well, we, meaning your reading audience, don't have any reporters at our disposal like you do. So send the reporters, send them out. Ask them to interview the person who's in charge of CPS. Tell us who it is. Interview a couple workers at CPS. Interview a couple kids if you can find them. Interview a couple foster parents, and then we'll get a pretty full picture of what's going on. It's called the Fourth Estate. Then going on here, the Post says, was it a procedural issue due to insufficient social workers to handle the enormity of the problem, compounded by other problems? Who will be held accountable for the children who needed help and didn't get the assistance of CPS as urgently as they should have? I think I know the answer to that one already. Nobody. The governor's office is supposed to release more details soon. It stated Sunday in response to the Post. We do know in general that CPS staff members have been struggling with the sheer number of reports of cases of neglected and abused children, and social workers are carrying the weight of more cases than they can humanly handle. The fiscal 2020 CPS reported receiving 1,142 referrals, included 57 that included allegations serious enough to warrant assignment to the CPS Crisis Intervention Unit. This is kind of like the CPS SWAT team, which addresses the most egregious incidents of child abuse and neglect. One social worker wrote to us last year, a few months into the pandemic, saying, and our hearts go out to the children and the social worker. I've seen the abused, abandoned, neglected, or broken, and it never gets easier. I've had to feed, shower, and clothe children. Yes, there are times we take these children into our homes and go into battle with other government agencies to provide services to the children who belong to the government. We often discuss that these children belong to our island. So why must we always do the best we can with extremely limited resources? I think maybe we need another Joe to call us up and once again explain to us Patgun Madzuti. Yeah. We will respond every morning to the 100 plus monthly referrals that CPS receives, with a staff inclusive of 2 intake workers, 2 crisis workers, 5 investigators, 7 case management workers, and 1 supervisor for our entire island of children. We are social workers who continue to get ridiculed when we actually care before, during, and after this Wuhan virus, wrote one CPS social worker. We're not looking for sympathy, but dignity for the profession of a CPS social worker. To fully understand this issue and to assist social workers at the front line helping neglected and abused children, the legislature must hold an oversight hearing and give the social workers the opportunity to share their thoughts and concerns without fear of repercussion. The executive order brought to light the issue of abused and neglected children who have fallen through cracks in the system, in part because due to a lack of staffing and a host of other issues. It looks like this is only the surface that is now being scratched by those in power to make changes. Hopefully, the reform will follow with the well-being of the children in mind first and foremost. Okay, well, good shot, Guam Daily Post. You're back in the Blue Star range again for that editorial. Congratulations. That takes the Post up to 238 blue stars. If only we had another daily newspaper on the island. We have the Guam extension of a Washington D.C. newspaper that hires some local folks to tell us about what's going on in D.C., and that's the closest we get. Okay, let's take a look at the card. This is what I got for today. I had a program summary. I thought I had a program summary. Yeah, I gotta look for it on my email because wait a minute. I got a program summary right here. Yeah, here's the program summary. We start out Tall Tales versus Nancy Pelosi. I wrote to Nancy about impeachment. I think you'll kind of enjoy my little note to Nancy. And then the next item on the card is Nelson versus Respicio, which is kind of a derivation of Brown versus Despicio and Tenorio. And then I've got Biden the unborn, the KKK versus BLM, a detailed description of the legal technicalities of Guam versus USA. I'm going to just hang on to this. It's not exactly a barn-burning information. It's very technical and not particularly interesting, but it is what's going on with our Supreme Court case in D.C. And then I've got revolutionists versus Christians, which I'll probably handle at the same time as I handle Biden versus the unborn. And then I'll go to Reid versus Biden. Tara Reid. Tara Reid was the lady who accused Joe Biden of some rather nasty sexual activity during the time that she worked for his office when he was a senator. And of course, Tara Reid is just a household word. You read about it all the time. The WAPO, the New York Times are constantly saying, when will Tara Reid get justice? Yeah.
Ironically, she was canceled.
She was canceled, yeah, because she made a complaint against the lefty. She was canceled. And when that came up during the debates, the current vice president of the United States, when asked after the debate, well, what about Tara Reid? What should we do? Do you believe it? And her response was, you have to believe the woman, unless he's saying something bad about Joe Biden. And then your response is, it was a debate.
Come on, man.
Yeah. So when somebody pins down our current vice president, she goes into paroxysms of laughter. And no matter how serious the question is, she can laugh it off. I think a skill that she's going to need more often than not since she's become vice president. Yeah, we got Catholic Joe telling us about abortion. And we've got KKK and BLM are more similar than what you might have gathered. And then a couple holdovers from earlier cards. So let me start out here with let me start out with Tall Tales versus Nancy Pelosi. I'll come right back to this after a short break.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Half a day. This is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we are. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my new pen pal, Nancy. I got a couple of things I got to lay out first, though, before I actually get into the letter. Starting out with one of my all-time favorite written documents, the United States Constitution. Article 1, Section 3 of the United States Constitution says, the Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. When sitting for that purpose, they shall be on oath or affirmation. When the President of the United States is tried, The Chief Justice shall preside, and no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. And then we've got Article 2, Section 4, Clauses 6 and 7. The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. But the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable for indictment, etc. So the Senate tries them. The Chief Justice presides when the president has been impeached, and the penalty is impeachment or the punishment shall be removal from office and a possibility of disqualification to hold any office of honor or trust or profit. So I had my own idea of who I'd like to see impeached. Actually, I'd like to see several people impeached. So I wrote up this email and emailed it to Nancy, but first you go to Nancy's website and you fill out this form, and they'll send you an email address. So I filled out the form and sent it back, and I got a note back. Your zip code shows that you don't live in the 12th District of California. Therefore, you can't write to Nancy Pelosi. And then it referred me to another website. So I tried that email and got an instant message back saying this email is out of service. Here is an email you might try. So I tried that email and got a message back saying the mailbox is full. Try again later. This is our man of the people, Nancy Pelosi. She's really in touch with people. She's just waiting to hear what you have to tell her. And the same, a diversion here, trying to email government of Guam directors is not a whole lot different. You would think that a director would put his email address front and center on the website. But so often I've had to either call the agency or call the governor's office to get the email address of a director. But anyhow, that's Nancy. You don't ever get the idea that you could just sit down and write her an email like, you're a regular person. If you lived in the 12th District of California, I don't know what screening device you go through then. But so I sent the email, and then when that happened, I printed the email and I put a little Post-it note on it, and I said, Madam Speaker, this is the email I couldn't send to you. Please respond by email. Thank you, Robert Klitzkie. And here's what I said. It has come to my attention that the House of Representatives recently impeached President Trump when he had but 1 week remaining on his term. Of course, there wasn't sufficient time for a trial on such short notice. In fact, you have not yet sent the articles of impeachment to the Senate. Even though Trump is no longer president, you and others have been heard to say that the trial must go forward, not to remove the president from office, but to convict him so that the conviction serves as a, quoting from the Constitution, disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. So that's the end of the quote. Until your fast-track impeachment, I would have thought that impeachment would lie only against a sitting officer, as impeaching someone not in office would seem to be a non sequitur, not contemplated by our Constitution. Actually, I submit that the appropriate constitutional pigeonhole for a post office procedure would be Article 1, Section 9, prohibition against bills of attainder. Here's Article 1, Section 9. Yeah, I always have trouble finding this. Yeah, here it is. Article 1, Section 9, Paragraph 3. No bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. Well, an ex post facto law is making something the subject of a criminal prosecution after the act has occurred. A bill of attainder is a legislative punishment as opposed to a judicial punishment, where the legislature, in our case, the Senate, goes through its motions and says, Mr. X shall be punished as follows. Now, we do have one constitutionally recognized bill of attainder, and that's impeachment. You can impeach a president. But I said, rather than try to bring Trump under, rather than try to understand what you're doing to Trump under the impeachment articles, you ought to look at this bill of attainder, because that's exactly what it is. The Congress, or people in Congress, attempting to punish Donald Trump. So then I go on to say this. However, if you have found that impeachment of a private citizen is appropriate, watch out, Jose. You and I could be impeached. I request that your House of Representatives impeach former President Obama for his role in what is popularly described as Fast and Furious. Well, Obama is no longer president and can never seek that office again. A Trump-style impeachment would serve as prophylaxis to his service on the Supreme Court, which, according to members of your party, may have several vacancies in the near future, as soon as they pack it. If I can in any way be of assistance, please let me know. Respectfully submitted, Robert Klitzkie. Yeah. So I would expect that, and then on her website, it warns you, snail mail is the slowest way to communicate with Nancy, because in addition to everything else, it has to be inspected for security reasons to make sure there's no bomb in it or something like that. And I suspect because it has to be inspected to make sure it wouldn't offend Nancy's delicate sensibilities, by saying something nasty about tuna canneries and American Samoa or something like that. Yeah. So, reductio ad absurdum. That's what this letter is. If you can bring articles of impeachment against the president during his last week in office when it's impossible to have a trial. If you study the idea of impeachment, it's to get a bad person out of office relatively quickly. Well, he's almost out of office. And then after he's out of office, then have the trial. So it's the classic case of the Red Queen. The punishment first, then the verdict. And if we could impeach Trump after he's out of office, and if that is the appropriate reading of the Constitution, then we could impeach Obama. And I suppose the left would like to go back and impeach George W. Bush for the whole weapons of mass destruction issue. And, why stop there? Washington, Jefferson, slaveholders. Maybe we could go back and impeach them.
It's happened in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of that pope, But
I just pulled it up. It was Pope Formosus, and it was called the Cadaver Synod. They dug his body up.
They dug up the Pope who took Formosus out of office. Was so angry that they dug up former Pope Formosus, y defunto, put him on the stand and tried him and found him guilty of heresy. Yeah. Yeah, so I suspect that as irreligious as they are, this would be one Catholic that the left could really respect. Yeah. So it goes to show you how ridiculous these lefties can be. And of course, I mentioned this before in the Tall Tales versus Van chat that we had, where, you know, Van was really happy that Obama was being impeached. And I wrote back and I said, wouldn't drawing and quartering be better? Because this has nothing to do with the operation of the government, nothing to do with good government. What Trump did that is so serious that he should be pulled out of office. This is about punishing Trump, and by derivation, punishing us. How could you people be so stupid as to support this person when we kept telling you over and over? And now he's impeached, and we're going to see to it that he can never run for president again. Now, the fact that most of the people in their delusion would want Trump, no, you don't understand the left. It's not what the people think it's best for them. It's what the left thinks is better for them. That's the definition of democracy. So I'll let you know when I get an answer from Nancy. I don't want to incur any liability here, though. So I'll let you know when I get a response from Nancy. But don't hold your breath. All right. Next item on the card, Talina versus Rory. And you'll recall that we started out here with a story about a gentleman named Frankie Rosalind, who was convicted of official misconduct because he was part of a drug scandal at the prison. After Frankie was convicted and sentenced, he's still on probation. Miracle of miracles, he was hired at the port. Rory explained it by telling us it was merit-based. That's another situation where I struggled with. Do you hold someone's past against them to the point where you're going to keep on holding them down? Respicio admitted he, meaning Rosalind, submitted an application, he qualified for the job, he interviewed, and then the selection was made. Rory had nothing to do with the selection, according to the sentence here. And by the way, I was doing some research about this and about Rory and stuff like that, and I'm a pretty astute reader. I have to do a lot of reading to prepare for this show, and I'm usually pretty good at finding what I'm looking for, pulling it out and encapsulating it. But I got confused yesterday when I was trying to put this story together, because I was looking for something about Rory, and I found this story with Rory's name in it, but it looked more like a press release from the president of Venezuela. You know, the president of Venezuela, you know, when he ran for no matter who he was, this one or the one before him, ran for re-election, 99% of the people always voted for him, and on and on and on. So I found this story about Rory, and they did a survey. And when I was reading through the results in this survey, I thought, did I go to the wrong page on the internet? It looks like I'm reading something about Nicolas Maduro here instead of, no, it's Rory. It's Rory's survey from the port. Ah, how stupid of me. Just because the numbers all look like something from a Latin American dictatorship, well, it was all merit-based, I'm sure. So anyhow, Rory said it was all merit-based, that he had an interview, etc. Well, then the next thing that happens is the lieutenant governor comes forward to defend Frankie Rosalind's hiring by saying, I had no role in Rosalind's hiring. In fact, I think we even had an audio of the lieutenant governor going on camera and saying, when they asked him, what can you tell us about the hiring of Frankie Rosalind at the port? And the lieutenant governor said, I see nothing. I hear nothing. I know nothing. My name's Sergeant Schultz. No, not quite. But he protested a little bit too much for someone who really had no role in it. He did clear the air by telling us that Rosalind, his sister, is Rosalind's quasi-spouse. And then he also said that he didn't know anything about Rosalind's being hired until after the interview. Now, if he wanted to completely exonerate himself, he would have said, I didn't know anything about this until I read it in the paper. But when he said, I didn't know anything about it until after the interview, then you take a minute to understand how the government hiring process works. Application screened, qualified applicants referred to rated. Top 5 of the rated applications go before an interview panel, interview conducted, and another rating. And then the results of the interview panel are transmitted to the director. So the interview is not the end of the process. That would be if you wanted to insert your influence into the process, the interview would be the perfect place to do it, after the interview. Because the director can pick from the top 5. He doesn't have to pick the top 1. And Rory would have you believe, he was interviewed and he was selected, kind of like, the panel said he was the best. Doesn't necessarily follow. So then the next olive out of that jar was Senator Brown, saying that Senator Brown introduced a bill number 37-36, which says anybody convicted of official misconduct can't work for the government. That doesn't seem to be unduly punitive. Official misconduct on a government job, one would have thought would have been a bar to employment with the government already, but it's not. So Senator Brown came along and closed that loophole. And then Rory's chief of police came back with a kind of a half-hearted defense of Rory on a totally different subject, and it really didn't defend Rory. It was an attempt to smear Brown about an employee who didn't test positive for drugs. It didn't go anywhere. And then Brown came back and said, I would like to see an investigation of port hiring and drug testing records. That makes sense to me, because what the chief of police at the port, what it turns out is that there was an employee who was scheduled for a drug test who resigned and then was hired back. Now that's kind of convenient. We saw that the first half of that game here just recently. But it would be a really sneaky thing to figure, hey, I smoked marijuana yesterday. I'm not going to be good for 30 days. I'll resign. I'll tell you what, I'm going to resign now, but in 31 days, I'm going to reapply. Can you hire me back? Oh, yeah, if you can pass a drug test. Okay. That isn't what happened, but these are the kinds of things that come to mind. So then the chief of police at the port said that he didn't test positive. He resigned, but he didn't test positive. And Joanne Brown knows that, and she's just saying bad things because she doesn't like the port. And Brown says, okay, fine. Let's have an investigation of the port, and let's take a look at all these drug test records. And if you're right, Chief, you got something going for you. If you're not, y'all got a problem. So that was that. And then the next inning is January 25, which is today. A notice of a public hearing is published. And the notice of the public hearing says there will be an oversight hearing of the Port Authority of Guam recruiting practices, hiring practices, and human resources management 2016 to the present. Now, going back 2016, that goes all the way back, and that'll pick up the Port 7 and the whole thing. So this is really, really interesting, and I've got a whole lot more to say about this, but I hate to keep people hanging on the strap in the green room too long. So let me just take a check. Let me take a check and see who I'm going to be talking to right after this break here. It's R. James. Okay, so we're going to take a short break, and then I'm going to come back to R. James.
Want to win $100? Join the Guam Visitors Bureau's Protect Guam campaign series to show how you're helping our island in the fight against COVID-19. There are 2 ways to win. Upload your photos or videos to visitguam.com or share on social media how you're wearing your mask, showcasing Guam heroes, or staying active and healthy with the Protect Guam hashtag. Don't forget to download the Guam COVID Alert app. Let's protect and support each other through these tough times. For a chance to win $100, check out visitguam.com.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations, check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu.
So, okay, here we are, back again, Tall Tales, with none other than R. James. Good afternoon, R. James.
How's it going, Bob?
Doing great.
Hey, when you opened up the show, you had a comment about the white supremacists and the gun violence and yada, yada, yada. And it sounds like it kind of sort of ties into, like, they're talking about white supremacist groups / militias / I guess anybody who seems to think that the Constitution is not something you should wipe your butt with. So I'm going to overstate the obvious here a little bit. And, you know, old sayings and old adages, there's a reason why they're old, because in many cases they're absolutely spot on correct, if not at least usually relevant to whatever it's being applied to. And my great-grandfather used to say, don't tap dance on quicksand. But if you're standing on solid rock, bring your soapbox and invite everybody around you to bring their 2 cents. Okay, well, I think what he was trying to get to is that you should know what you're talking about before you make comments, especially if you're not going to qualify them with things like, in my opinion, or don't take my word for it, look it up. And that's what this comment is going to be based under. This is under don't take my word for it, look it up. According to the FBI and the Department of Justice, on a survey of all 50 states, and I do believe, I could be wrong, but I believe it also covered the insular territories. And Bob, with your legal background, do you know what the #1 cause of violent death is in the United States for the last, I can't remember what this was, 10 years or so running.
My suspicion is it's probably marriage.
There you go. Okay.
Husbands killing wives, wives killing husbands.
Yeah. No, the cause of the death, not who's doing the killing.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah. The number one cause of death, according to the FBI, is hands and feet. And then in parentheses, I believe they put boots or shoes. Not fully automatic weapons, not short barrel rifles, not illegally procured unregistered weapons that were sold by the ATF to the cartel so they could see if they'd come back across the border. No. The number one cause of death, i.e. violent crime murders, is hands and feet. Number two is blunt objects. Don't take my word for it. Everybody be self-educated. Set yourself free. Go search it up. It's right there in the FBI statistics on the Department of Justice website. So as all of these people who are wanting to do away with the supremacist groups because of gun violence, they need to go do a little soul and fact searching before they start making statements that are quote-unquote matter of fact.
Pardon me, R. James, but I'm going to have to object to what you just said. You assumed a fact, not an evidence.
Uh-oh.
You said soul.
Okay, Judge, set me straight.
You said soul searching.
Well, yeah, that goes on the premise that there's a soul there to start with.
That's what I mean. You know, in the absence of proof, I'm not willing to stipulate that Democrats have souls. I'd have to be convinced.
And that would be a good stipulation. It certainly would be, sir. And I defer to your expertise on that. So, but the other thing that you've got expertise in is criminals. Okay. What is the definition of a criminal, and what does a criminal do? A criminal has already predisposed his intention that he's going to break the law no matter what. Now, you can write 50 laws that say it's illegal to speed when the speed limit is 30 miles an hour. You can write 50 laws that it's illegal to commit murder and to possess an illegal firearm. But a criminal doesn't care, because the criminal is already predisposed to the fact that he's going to break that and every other law that's written that keeps him from accomplishing what he has in his twisted or her twisted little mind that they want to do. Laws mean nothing to criminals. Laws only mean things to people that don't want to break them and want to make sure that they don't ever run afoul of them. And to remind people what happens if you do violate those laws. But criminals don't care. You can write 50 laws. The criminal doesn't care, because he's going to violate every one of them, because he's already made up his mind that he's going to go down and he's going to buy an illegal gun from a hood member out of the back of a trunk for, $100. And he's going to go rob that 7-Eleven. And if somebody gets shot, well, he's already decided that it's worth it for him to do that for whatever his reasoning is. And quite frankly, a lot of the reasoning on the streets today is, well, first of all, I can probably get away with it. I'll never even get caught. But if I do get caught, then, okay, so I'll get 3 squares a day, air conditioning, color TV, a rec room, and conjugal visits for 3, 4, 5 years of my 20-year sentence, and then they'll let me out on good behavior and because they're overcrowded.
And besides that, the guy wouldn't have to listen to Tall Tales when he was in the Slammer. Got to let you go, R. James. Got the big halftime show coming up. Thanks for
Good
calling.
deal, Bob. Talk to you later.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Quick and painless. I'm Mary Corsetti, Fox News. That's what Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is hoping for the impeachment trial of former President Trump.
Only way to bring healing is to actually have real accountability, which this trial affords. And so we will move forward with the trial. It will be fair, but it will move at a relatively fast pace.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is dropping off the article of impeachment to the Senate Monday evening. Senators will be sworn in as jurors Tuesday, and the main trial will start the week of February 8th. Some Republicans have argued that holding an impeachment trial for a president who's no longer in office is unconstitutional. Meanwhile, the Seattle chief of police announcing there will be tougher policies for prosecuting protesters who vandalize property or resort to violence after police declared an unlawful assembly last week when over 150 rioters began to vandalize property, including an immigration and customs enforcement facility.
Chief Adrian Diaz saying that there is a big difference between a peaceful protest and, of course, people simply causing damages to buildings and private property. Authorities say on Wednesday, this was Inauguration Day, a group of people marched through the streets of Seattle, vandalizing several buildings, including smashing the windows of an Amazon Go store and a Starbucks at the city's famous Pike Place Market. Police arresting 3 people. They face charges of burglary, assault, and property damage.
Fox's Alex Hogan. Also new tonight, U.S. Senator John Hickenlooper and a bipartisan coalition of senators met virtually Sunday with members of President Biden's pandemic response team to discuss the urgent need to pass additional COVID economic relief and prioritize vaccine distribution. Hickenlooper released a statement tonight calling it a productive meeting and pressed on the importance of focusing on the nation's small businesses, especially restaurants and other service industries. America is listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Claire Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Cities and states across the nation begin to report shortages of the coronavirus vaccine. But according to the CDC, about half of the 41 million doses provided to the states have been distributed so far.
The pandemic rages on with more problems. The U.S. is on the edge of surpassing 25 million known coronavirus cases. The states are finding it increasingly hard to get their hands on new supplies of the vaccine, and the situation is growing more confusing by the day as health officials around the country desperately try to get answers about why the much anticipated vaccine is now in short supply. New shipments are shrinking by the thousands, forcing states like Colorado and Oregon to hold back on plans to expand access. In New York City, officials were forced to cancel more than 20,000 appointments this week as supplies reach critical levels statewide.
Fox's Charles Watson. Meanwhile, the governor of Massachusetts is easing certain COVID restrictions facing state businesses as of Monday morning.
For the past 11 weeks, restaurants, salons, gyms, and other businesses have had to close up shop by 9:30 p.m. But that's all changing, and the governor says it's thanks to improving COVID-19 numbers. Restaurants and other businesses can stay open past 9:30 p.m. The stay-at-home advisory is also being lifted. That curfew had encouraged people to stay home between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. Now, one restriction not changing is the 25% capacity restriction for restaurants and other businesses. That will remain in place for at least the next 2 weeks.
WFXT Fox Boston's Julie Julianne Lima. Plus, Mexican President Lopez Obrador said he has tested positive for COVID-19, making the announcement as his country registers the highest levels of infections and deaths to date. Lopez Obrador, who has been criticized for his handling of Mexico's pandemic and for not setting an example of prevention in public, said Sunday on his official Twitter account that his symptoms are mild and he's undergoing medical treatment. I'm Mary Corsetti, and this is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Buying a house, apartment, or condo, selling your home or property, or maybe you're renting a house, apartment, or condo on Guam. Whatever your real estate needs are, you can count on the professionals at Horizon Properties to take care of you. Call Horizon Properties at 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonproperties.com or follow them on Facebook at Horizon Properties Guam. Maria Miller and the professionals at Horizon Properties. All you need to know in real estate.
Introducing the fastest growing virtual kitchen on Guam. Ghost Table is a secret professional food prep and cooking facility set up for delivery-only meals. The menu is a collaboration of Guam chefs with a passion for creating great-tasting food. Choose from the Westside Hawaiian Grinds, 671 Burger, Side Street Tacos and Burritos, and Osaka Stop. Search for Ghost Table on Grab and Grub to check out the menu and to place your order. Satisfaction guaranteed. Exclusively with Grab and Grub.
So here we are, our big halftime show again, once again on Tall Tales. It doesn't get any better than that. And we're back again for the second half of Tall Tales. And I'm still working on Talina versus Rory. I noticed a rather clever quip here on Facebook relating back to something R. James said. R. James was talking about how the weapons, statistically, the weapons that cause the most violent deaths in the United States, he made a good point. It ain't guns. It's not guns. Hands, feet, etc. And then, of course, if it's feet, well, it could be shoes. And he also referenced some folks on the other side of the political spectrum doing some soul searching. And I questioned whether or not he was assuming a fact, not an evidence, when he stated that these folks had souls. But Jose Martinez comes back and he says, footwear are the #1 weapon of choice in the U.S., according to the FBI. R. James got that stat from soul searching.
Only quality here at Tall Tales.
Yeah, well, the next time I'm not feeling really good, I'm going to let you take over the show. You're pretty good at that yourself there, Jose. Plays on words and puns, etc. I think you could probably handle it pretty well.
We might have a couple of people turn off from the groaning.
Okay, so I'm just still talking about the latest element in what we'll call we're going to start calling Rosalind Gate. the hiring of Frankie Rosalind at the port, even though he'd been convicted of official misconduct. Rosalind Gates started out with that. Rory starting out making some, strange statements about throwing people away, kind of putting himself in the position of this great merciful leader who wants to give people second chances, and then trying to distance himself from the process by kind of suggesting that the selection committee chose Rosalind rather than himself. And then the lieutenant governor comes along and tries to distance himself from it, telling us that Rosalind's quasi-wife is his sister, but then telling us he didn't know anything about Rosalind at all until after the interview, which I would phrase like this: between the interview and the hiring.
He inserted himself in the timeline.
Yeah, he did indeed. So the lieutenant governor drew some fire there. Joanne Brown, who ran on a campaign of combating corruption in the government, then comes swooping in and introduces a bill that would make it impossible for anyone who's convicted of official corruption to work for the government, causing the chief of police at the port to come back and try and smear Brown. It didn't work very well. And then the next, and the really heavy shot here, is Talina Nelson calling an oversight hearing on February 2 for the port recruitment practices, hiring practices, and human resources management to 2016 to the present. 2016. That's going to pick up a lot of the action in the Port 7 cases. So extremely interesting on its face, what she wants to do. But then we start to consider some of the angles here. Talina is a Democrat. Talina used to be the vice speaker. She got aced out of being the vice speaker by former Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes, who was deposed by Therese Terlahi. Therese Terlahi made herself a reputation during the last legislature as the only Democrat that would ever cross swords. Well, not the only one, but the most prominent Democrat to ever cross swords with the governor. All the rest of them, the suspicion was that the governor would send them their playbook every morning, asking them to practice a little while before the session started. So Therese is, not in the house with the governor, but I have a feeling that the Therese may not be on the governor's Christmas card list. I don't know that for a fact. Although I'm on the governor's Christmas card list.
You're on somebody's Hanukkah list.
Yeah. So that's where Therese is. And Talina, perhaps has a little anger because she was obviously shoved aside by Tina and the pro-governor forces. And Tina has always been one of those who has been right in there with the governor. So here's a thesis. I'm not saying it's correct, but the thesis was that Therese knew that she could round up a few Republicans to support her for Speaker. 7 Republicans and 1 Therese makes Therese Speaker. So rather than run the risk of that kind of an open rift in the Democrat Party and all of the friction that would come with it, perhaps someone walked into the locker room and said to Therese, "This ain't your night, kid. We're going for the price on Wilson." In other words, Tina Rose took a dive. Said, "Okay, I'll stand aside. I'll let Therese be Speaker, all in the name of party unity, but you got to give me a lot." Well, what do you want? Well, I want vice speaker, I want rules, and I want the 4th branch of government to come back as the executive director of the legislature. That's Carlo Branch. Okay, but what about Talina? I think Talina wanted to be chairman of rules herself. Well, we'll let her be majority leader. That's all right, never mind. So this is perhaps, according to a way of looking at it, maybe this is the Nelson Strikes Back. Or it could be, give Nelson to Talina, maybe she wants to put Rory in a full Nelson here until he says uncle. because maybe she reads the papers like everybody else and knows that there are just a lot of things that happen at the port after Rory came along that just didn't look right. And the way to get to the bottom of those things is to go back and take a look at the Port 7 and then the hiring of Frankie Rosalind and all of these other things. And Rory kind of called a lot of attention to himself with that survey.
It's a little coincidental that it came out.
Yeah. It's kind of like Rory thinks, well, I'm going to take some hits here, so I better burnish my reputation a little bit before I better start running downhill before I got to start running uphill. So maybe that's what's motivating Talina, but this could be an extremely interesting oversight hearing. My only regret is that it's visual. Virtual, and it's just not the same thing.
They're still doing virtual?
Still doing virtual. And it's not the same thing as a real public hearing.
When is it scheduled for?
February 2nd, 10 a.m. Yeah. So that's what's coming down on February 2nd. And it's going to be interesting to see who wants to testify, what kind of testimony they could put forth. I've talked to enough people to know that there's some really dynamite testimony if anyone wants to come along and lay it out there. But an interesting chapter. And Rory, if you had it to do all over again, would you have hired Frankie Rosalind to be, after he's convicted of official misconduct? An interesting question. Okay, next on the calendar is Biden versus the unborn. Biden commits on National Sanctity of Life Day to enshrine Roe versus Wade. Great sense of timing. The president issued a statement that stands in stark contrast with Trump's administration's position on abortion. On Friday, acknowledging the 48th anniversary of Supreme Court's Roe versus Wade decision, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris issued a statement committing to support and defend the landmark court decision that legalized abortion nationwide and to work to have it codified into law. Now, there's a stretch. I guess we got to get out our Law and Order notebooks, Jose. In the past 4 years, reproductive health. It's amazing what they do with the language. Reproductive health. What is the term used to kill innocent babies in the womb? Oh, that's reproductive health. Including the right to choose who lives and dies, has been under relentless and extreme attack. This is Biden's words. We are deeply committed to making sure everyone has access to care, including reproductive health care, regardless of income, race, zip code, health insurance. That's what he said. He said
it.
I didn't add that in.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, no matter what your zip code is, health insurance status or immigration status.
So he plagiarized that from Pelosi.
Probably. So everyone has access to care except unborn babies in the womb. They have no access to care. Biden, a self-described devout Catholic, and Harris said in a joint statement. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to codifying Roe versus Wade. This is, again, a quote from Joe, and appointing judges that respect fundamental precedents like Roe. There is no fundamental precedent in Roe. It's one of the worst decisions the Supreme Court has ever come up with, regardless of where you stand on the abortion issue. It is the foundation of Roe is a fiction that somehow in the emanations and penumbras of the Bill of Rights you could find a right of privacy. And because there's that right of privacy there, it extends so far as to allow a mother to kill a child in her womb. That is an extreme form of privacy. So that's the foundational precedent of Roe versus Wade. Abortion rights activists have long sought to have Roe enshrined in federal law to create national abortion policy that would limit states' ability to pass abortion restrictions. Now, I took a look at this, my favorite book, and I don't see, I look at Article 1, Section 8, and Article 1, Section 8 starts out, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, etc., to borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with foreign nations among several states and with the Indian tribes. I don't find anything in there that says Congress shall have the right to protect abortion. It just is not one of Congress's powers. And it is something that has always been the province of the states. Criminal law, the regulation of personal conduct, is a matter for the states. And I've mentioned this before. Fort Leavenworth, the Leavenworth Penitentiary was built in the mid-30s. It was the first federal penitentiary ever built, because we didn't need one up until then. There were so few federal crimes that we didn't need a federal penitentiary. But then during the 30s, the likes of John Dillinger, Babyface Nelson, Machine Gun Kelly, all of whom were probably white supremacists, we just didn't know it at the time, right? Caused the national government to build a federal penitentiary. And at the time that John Kennedy was assassinated, had Oswald, or whoever it was that did the assassination, been tried, he would have had to been tried in Texas courts because there was no federal law against murder. Yeah. And there's still no general federal law against murder, because in order to have what people call a federal crime, I would call national crime, there has to be some constitutional nexus. You have to tie it to one of the powers here in Article 1, Section 8. Regulation of commerce comes to light most often. So somehow Biden is going to have to make the argument that in the process of regulating Congress, he can regulate what states can do with respect to women and their bodies, which is always, one of the things that they keep coming back to. So until the Income Tax Amendment, until the 16th Amendment came along, almost the only time that the national government ever interacted with regular citizens was at the post office, because most government came from the states. That was the design of the states. That's when we had a federal government, a government that only concentrated on a few limited things per the delegation of sovereignty from the states, that it could do better than the individual states. So matters of personal conduct like crime, marriage, etc., had always been the province of the states until the left came along, grabbed the courts, and moved the national government so far to the left that I joke from time to time that by the time they're finished, we will have a national government and 50 administrative zones, sort of like glorified counties, and that's all that's going to be left. So I don't know how one could, with a straight face, talk about a federal law to protect abortion. If Roe versus Wade were reversed, what would happen would be it would once again be a matter of state law. Some state laws would criminalize abortion. Some states would not criminalize abortion. That's the way it was before Roe. So you can't expect the folks in Utah to feel the same way about social issues as the folks in New York or Miami or someplace like that. It is a beautiful system. It relies on the principle of subsidiarity. Subsidiarity means decisions descend to the lowest level capable of handling them, because the farther down the food chain you get, the closer you are to the people and the better quality decisions you're going to make. We turned it around. Now we're back to the point where faceless bureaucrats in Washington will tell us where little Johnny and little Susie have to go when it's time to go wee-wee. You know, which one of the restrooms they're going to use. So this is exactly the kind of thing that the left loves to get into. We're going to pass a federal law to protect women's right to choose. Great. And this is all in the name of uniting us, bringing us all back together. 16 executive orders his first day in office, and I use the analogy of the red flag and waving a red flag in front of a bull. This isn't true, but the old wives' tale is that bulls become angry when they see red. So if you want to make a bull really angry, go out and wave a red flag at him. So somebody told Joe Biden about that, and he said, well, you know, Republicans are always talking about red states. I'm going to get me a red flag. And my first day in office, I'm going to sit there and sign these executive orders and wave a red flag in front of conservatives as I do away with as much of what they put in place as I can. We're going to have a federal law to protect abortion. Yeah. And, of course, who goes right along with it and drinks it up like it's a cat drinking milk out of a bowl? The entire mainstream media, oh, he's such a wonderful man. He's a uniter. Yeah. Uniting for the Democrats means tyranny. In other words, a single point of view that everyone must buy into, and if you don't, bad things are going to happen to you. You're going to be canceled. That's be the least worst thing that could happen to you. So anyhow, that's what Joe is going to do. He's going to have a federal law to create a national abortion policy that would limit states' ability to pass abortion restrictions. State-led efforts to pass heartbeat bills banning abortions once a fetal heartbeat is detected, or laws banning abortion after 20 weeks when an adult unborn child can feel pain, could potentially be thwarted if federal law set the rules and procedures for abortion. Who cares if they can feel pain? They're not going to live anyhow. Pro-abortion activists see these state restrictions as unconstitutional infringements on the right to abortion. Nearly half a century later, abortion is a right in name only for millions of people across the country. And tell me about that Instagram note that you saw the other day. No, I guess it was somebody else. You didn't see it. There's an Instagram note that's floating around that said, we haven't had an abortion doctor here since 2018. This is pretty serious. And I guess even Joanne, as you were, Jane Flores, who's going to do a new Facebook picture of herself in a deer slayer hat.
Oh, boy.
You know, a deer slayer hat has a brim on each end, and it's the one that Sherlock Holmes wore when he was out on a case. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Jane has been out there sleuthing, trying to find an abortionist for us. But even Jane Flores can't find one. Nearly half a century later, abortion is a right in name only for millions of people across the country. Now, here's a reliable source. Planned Parenthood President Alexis McGill Johnson said in a statement to The Hill Friday. Yeah, Planned Parenthood, women's health, Planned Parenthood. As reproductive justice organizations have said for years, Roe is the floor, not the ceiling. We want more abortions. Without access to abortion, this right is meaningless. Now is the time for President Obama and our elected officials and states across the country to take necessary and immediate action to ensure that everyone, no matter their race, income, zip code, has access to safe and legal abortion. Mine is 96929. I hope there's no abortion in my zip code. What's yours? Is there abortion in yours, Jose?
There's no abortion doctor in mine.
Uh-huh.
But we'll talk a little later about what abortion on Guam is.
All right. All right. The Biden-Harris statement stands in stark contrast to the policies of the previous administration. Donald Trump, in one of his last acts as president, for the fourth time proclaimed January 22 to be National Sanctity of Human Life Day, declaring every human life is a gift to the world. This month, we mark nearly 50 years since the United States Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision. This constitutionally flawed ruling overturned state laws that banned abortion and has resulted in the loss of more than 50 million innocent lives. Reproductive health. Only 50 million people died from this application of health. I call on Congress to join me in protecting and defending the dignity of every human life, including those not yet born. I call on the American people to continue to care for women in unexpected pregnancies and to support adoption and foster care in a more meaningful way so every child can have a loving home. And finally, I ask every citizen of this great nation to listen to the sound of silence created by a generation lost to us, 50 million people, and then to raise their voices for all affected by abortion, both seen and unseen. Since President Biden took office, the Trump statement announcing National Sanctity of Life Day was removed from the White House website. I guess you could say that statement was aborted. Let's take a short break here.
Off a day. This is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago with a seventh inning stretch. Everybody out there standing up and stretching, heading into the last two innings of Tall Tales. And Rob Hawk chips in with a pretty good one here. Rob Hawk wanted to know if the HR department of the port is located on the 19th floor. Yeah, one would think so, given some of the results that come out of there. Okay, next item on the card is Joe and George versus the U.S. military. Joe is Joe Biden, and I'll let you see if you can figure out who George is. This comes from The Hill, which is a pretty left website. I read a lot of left websites as well as the stuff on the right. I want to know what the other side is doing. I sometimes read it for comedy relief because of the things they try to pass off as correct. But this is from Ellen Mitchell, and she said, lawmakers are taking matters into their own hands to prevent white supremacists and other extremists from joining and remaining in the military. Yeah.
Ow.
Following the deadly January 6th attack on the Capitol and the now here's one that'll really get you, Jose. And the subsequent revelation that nearly 1 in 5 people charged in connection with the riot have some form of military background. Congress plans to insert language into this year's National Defense Authorization Act to address extremism at the Pentagon and other federal agencies. So what we need to do then is you know, we gotta get ahead of this violence caused by white supremacists. I'm going to suggest that everyone who is a veteran be required to sew a red V on the front of his shirt and also have a V and his military serial number tattooed on his arm so that we can spot these people before they could do us any harm. Veterans. Nearly 1 in 5 of the guys that did that were veterans. I can remember not that long ago when more than 1 in 5 of any crowd that you ever walked into was veterans. But it wasn't a bad thing in those days. The attack on our capital was an insurrection fueled in part by groups that espouse the same extreme white supremacist views that actively recruit veterans from their ranks of our military. Representative Anthony Brown, a Democrat from Maryland, said in a statement to this website. So these white supremacists, the military then kind of serves as a training ground for white supremacists. Maybe we should just come up and say, if you're white, we don't want you in the military. If you're not a person of color, no military for you. That would be the way to keep the white supremacists out. And then Brown, he's got an appropriate name, Anthony Brown, right? Yeah, don't ever call him white. We must recommit ourselves to rooting these beliefs out of our ranks. Rooting them. We've got to find out what people in the ranks of the military are thinking. You know, and let me stop here again. Let's say that in the inside of my head, I adopt the entire white supremacist dogma that white people are better than everybody else, white people should always be in charge, on and on and on and on. If that's what I think, should I be kicked out of the Army? Aren't people supposed to be free to think whatever it is that they want? If I think, and better than that, difference between thinking and believing. If I believe that the moon is made out of green cheese, should I be blacklisted by any manufacturer of cheese and not ever even given an application for an interview? If I want to think the moon is made out of green cheese and I don't act on it in such a manner that it interferes with someone else's rights, don't I have that right, Jose?
Not in the George Orwellian think police.
You already figured out who the George is, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is so Orwellian. So what we need in the military is thought police, because there are good thoughts and bad thought, right? So we must recommit ourselves to rooting these beliefs out of our ranks, protecting our service members from radicalization and ensuring all Americans feel safe serving the country we all love. Concerns about extremists in the ranks were thrust into the national spotlight after the January 6th insurrection. At least 27 of the more than 140 individuals charged in the attack have served or currently serving in the military. The Department of Defense has struggled with how best to root out white nationalists and extremists among its soldiers, sailors, and airmen. I think what we need undercover agents. You know, people that would live in the barracks and listen to soldiers talk, and when they find someone who they think is suspicious, they've got to become Karens. But they can't take it up the chain of command. They've got to take it to someone outside the military. A defense official told The Hill that of the 143 notifications of investigation the Pentagon received from the FBI last year of former and current military members, 68 concerned domestic extremism cases. 143 out of the whole country. And 63 concerned domestic extremism cases. What is domestic extremism?
White supremacists.
Yeah, it's a tautology. You know,
it's the way we use the words.
Yeah, you keep going around and around, and R. James kind of got into it. The criminal law punishes people for bad acts. It doesn't punish people for bad thoughts. It doesn't punish people because they might commit a crime. So if you find a person that has, you know, a cache of weapons and says all kinds of really white supremacist type things, and he's got his bus ticket for the nearest school, you can't arrest him for murder. It's unfortunate. Probably we should arrest people before they commit crimes, then we wouldn't have as many crimes, right? But that's the gist of this whole thing. There are people that have bad thought, and they must be rooted out of the military. Going on, still roughly 1/3 of active duty service members said they had personally witnessed examples of white nationalism or ideologically driven racism within the ranks in recent months. Tar and feather? Boiling in oil? According to a 2019 poll conducted by the Military Times. We know that some groups actively attempt to recruit our personnel into their cause or actually encourage their members to join the military for the purpose of acquiring skills and experience, a senior defense official told reporters earlier this month. That's a senior defense official. To address the issue, the Pentagon is now conducting a review of its policies on extremist activity in the service. They never really got around to dealing with the Muslim that killed, 14 soldiers at Fort Hood? You remember that time? Yeah. Who had been spouting Muslim rhetoric for a couple years before it happened. But when it came to whether he was a Muslim or a Christian or whatever it was Mokimbo. It was the truth that everyone knew, but they all agreed not to talk about it. You know why, Jose?
None of our business.
Islam is a religion of peace. That's all you need to know. To address the issue, the Pentagon is now conducting a review of its policies on extremist activities in the service. The Defense Department's Inspector General also plans to look into whether the agency has adequate procedures in place to prevent those with extreme views from entering and staying in the military, as ordered in the fiscal 2021 NDA. So if your thought process, you better clean up your head. If you're going to enlist, you better get the proper literature, get a hold of that book, White Fragility, by, what was her name? It'll come to me in a second. White Fragility and some of the Ta-Nehisi Coates stuff and some of these other anti-racism texts. You better be thoroughly familiar with anti-racism before you start talking to a recruiter, because you may accidentally slip up and say something that will bar you from military service, like all lives matter. Just one slip up like that and it could be over for you.
D'Angelo is the author.
Oh, yeah, D'Angelo. What's her first name?
Robin.
Robin D'Angelo, yeah. Yeah, Robin D'Angelo, she knocks down $15,000 or $20,000 for a 2-hour lecture telling people how bad they are. But lawmakers don't plan to wait for the results of those 2 reviews before taking action. We must better vet recruits for extremist ideologies, tackle the issues of white supremacy and domestic terror in an organized and bipartisan process, and focus on ensuring our military academies are training the next generation of leaders. And here we go, training the next generation of leaders that look like America. That's a great objective. Military leaders that look like America. And we can't have white supremacy or domestic terror. So people that have that, that warrior ethos, send me to Iraq. Send me to Iraq, and I will kill those people that keep me from accomplishing my No. We don't want that kind of a mentality in our military. It's going to be really difficult to be a Marine as we understand that terminology, because conventional wisdom is that the Air Force often goes off into the wild blue yonder. It's all very dreamy, etc. The Navy's always at sea with itself. Yeah, the Army's always hitting a dusty trail to somewhere. But the Marines know that their job is to fight. That's what their fights, that's what their song says. We will fight for right and freedom. None of the other songs say they're going to fight. So when you come right down to it, the job of Marines in combat is to break things and kill people. That won't wash here. You can't have people like that in the military. So I would imagine that, I'm playing this for a couple of laughs, but I expect the guys that are really seeing the humor in this are over in the People's Republic of China. I expect this is a real hee-haw for them. Yeah, lawmakers don't plan to wait for the results before taking action. We must better vet recruits for extremist ideologies, tackle the issues of white supremacy and domestic terror in an organization and bipartisan process, and focus on ensuring our military academies are training the next generation of leaders that look like America. Diversity is our strength, right? A member of the House Armed Services Committee, let's see. Oh, that was a member of the House Armed Services Committee and the Congressional Black Caucus. That's Brown, is a member of the Black Caucus. I suppose he has his own little caucus, intra-caucus called the Brown Caucus. Brown said he has been in touch with the Biden administration as well as Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin about these issues. On the other side of the Capitol, senators are looking at how the Pentagon is implementing provisions ordered in the 2021 NDA and crafting legislation for this year's bill. According to spokesperson for Senator Tim Kaine, that was Hillary's running mate, a true patriot, the committee will carefully monitor how DOD implements these provisions, and future legislation might be informed by what the committee learns from the DOD's updates. Senator Mike Bennett, a Democrat from Colorado, meanwhile plans to work with Senate colleagues in the Biden administration to root out hate in our military. Bennett last year offered an amendment to the annual defense bill that would require the Pentagon to report to Congress on the prevalence of white supremacy and other extremist ideologies within the armed forces. I got a little bit more to go here, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to stop. I'm probably going to come back to this tomorrow. I've got another Joe, and who else did I have in the green room?
You had Dr. Tom Poole, but he probably had to go.
Oh, shucks.
Yeah, hopefully he calls back.
Yeah, Tom, if you're listening, please call back. Okay, let's go. Let's head for Churchill Downs.
Rolling sound, quiet, and action.
The Ray Gibson Show, starring Senator Mona Silva Tyron as the news anchor.
I'm Mona Silva Tyron, and I'll have your local news every morning. Life moves pretty fast, so stay with us to stay informed right here on The Point.
Also starring Jerry Roberts as the Better Business Training Guru.
Get out there and do something good today, like listen to us Monday through Friday, 6 to 10 a.m., where we go extra for you.
Produced by the real Joe Cruz. And your warm and intelligent host, Ray Gibson.
It's the Gibson Stream of Consciousness. All the players and all the games with cameos and calls from the most interesting people like you. We'll see and hear you right here on your talk radio superstation. This is The Point.
The Ray Gibson Show was filmed before a live Facebook audience.
Okay, Google. Hey, Siri. Hi, Bixby.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Open the Point app. Opening.
Live stream, on demand, swap stations, check out the visual radio. Get the free app available on the App Store and Google Play, or go to thepoint.gu.
Okay, so here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm hoping that Dr. Tom Poole will grace us with a phone call calling back, and I'm going to chat with another Joe here for a moment on the home stretch. Good afternoon, another Joe.
Hey, Bob. So this thing about Biden suggesting him and his partner, was it Communist Harris? Or I got that wrong? Is she known to be socialist too?
Yeah, I've read a workup on her career, and she has so many close ties to Communist Party, et cetera, that she could never get a security clearance to hold a cabinet position in Washington.
Well, because there's some sort of the loophole or special treatment where if you're running for office, they don't do a background search.
There's a loophole called the United States Constitution. Age, citizenship, and residence. You can't add other qualifications to it.
Of course, she could go by that. The whole thing where, don't ask, don't tell is so bad that she feels so bad that she can't be honest, that she has to admit that she's a communist, right? She could do that.
Well, I suppose she could always take the fifth if anybody ever laid the question on her, but I got a feeling that she's unimpeachable.
Well, I mean, if she said that she was a communist, if she outright said it, then people wouldn't be confused about it. And then they could decide whether or not they liked her, right?
I suppose. And then in her case, you get it into that little game where when a person says, I never lie, is he telling the truth?
Good point.
Or I always telling the truth. Is he lying?
Good point again. So I called about the issue of being a good Catholic, and I would think that would be you definitely want the leaders, right, of the theological leaders of the Catholic Church, who are following the appropriate lifestyle, that are not, have not committed any crimes, so to speak, or didn't have knowledge, of any of these sex abuse claims or actual evidence of that occurring. So anyone that's left from all that, those theological leaders, you would think that those are the people you want to include in the judgment as to whether or not that Biden is a good Catholic. Would that be fair to say, Kavad?
Well, the bishop of the cardinal in Washington, D.C. has kind of celebrated Biden's election. There was a priest in one of the southern states that denied communion to Biden because he really can't. You can't take communion if you have committed a mortal sin and not gone through the confession process. So he shouldn't be taking. He can't be saying what he's saying and taking communion at the same time.
And fair is fair, Kabab, because they did the same thing to Giuliani, right? When Giuliani was running for president at some point in time, they denied Giuliani communion as well, right?
I wouldn't be surprised because he was a divorcee.
So the point of the matter is, we don't hear the Catholic theologians speaking up more about. We don't hear them speaking up enough, I think, and fact checking. Well, are they really good Catholic? Is he really a good Catholic? And because we don't want people to be confused as to whether or not we can trust his leadership, and it's going to be in the best interest of Catholics. So I just wanted to say that, bring that up.
Question back to you, another Joe. Is our governor a good Catholic?
Well, like I said, I would leave that to the church theologians, right? But so far, I would suggest that the pro-life movement, which gets its nod and to go ahead for whatever they do from the Catholic theologians and some of the particular priests here in our archdiocese, I would think that they would be the voice for the Catholic Church in our archdiocese, and they have come out and said that nope, she's trying to get an abortion doctor, so she can't be, right?
One would think so, yeah.
So that's pretty much what I wanted to chime in about, Bob. And oh wait, one other thing. Did you notice that that CNN stopped putting up all those the data and statistics about everyone that caught the virus, as if somehow magically it's not important enough, or is not that necessary under the change of leadership? Did you notice that, Uncle Bob?
I watch CNN so often, another Joe.
So maybe they should put it back up, right?
The only time I ever watch CNN is if I stumble into some store that has it on and they won't turn it off.
I think if they put it back up, they'll find that there's not much of a difference in what this new leadership could do. As a matter of fact, they'll probably be able to say that, hey, actually Trump expedited the vaccines availability and treatment. So anyway, thanks for your time, Uncle Bob, again, and I'll just keep listening.
Okay, another Joe. So just about the end here, I saw a couple of interesting things on the Facebook here. I got one here from Mospa Hockey, Jan Palau.
Who is that?
And he says, I heard that colored folks got edited out of the D.C. riot. But that's just rumors, of course. If it were true, they totally missed the brown guy waving the Palau national flag. But I had it. I talked about it here on the show. Yeah. Yeah, so I suppose, does that mean that if there was somebody there waving the Palau national flag, that he was a white supremacist?
I think they call it a brown white supremacist.
Okay. I haven't finished up with the nonsense here about what the Democrats are trying to do to our military. I'll come back to that tomorrow. and the usual raft of interesting topics on Tall Tales. See you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Making changes. Fox News. I'm Mary Corsetti. President Biden signing a flurry of executive orders during his first few days in office, calling for an expansion of COVID testing, ramping up vaccinations, and